My freshman year of college, I decided to spend my spring break in my hometown of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So instead of like a sexy co-ed beach party, I had just like Amish people on farms. To make matters worse, the night I arrived at home, my parents informed me that the day before, my grandfather died. So my sophomore year, I was hoping to have a little bit more fun on spring break. So I decided to go to New Orleans. 5 months after Katrina. It was one of those alternative spring breaks where you go and do service work. But I didn't tell any of my friends about this genius plan, so I ended up in a van full of strangers, most of whom were sorority girls who spent the majority of the 14-hour ride from North Carolina down to Louisiana gossiping about other sorority girls, which for me is the conversational equivalent of Chinese water torture. I wanted to get off that bus so bad I became the only person in history to be excited to arrive at a FEMA camp. And that night I lied down on my cot under this gigantic tent with steel girders stretching the length of a football field full of volunteers from around the country thinking, what the hell am I doing on this trip? Our first 2 days in the city involved like educational tourism, which is where you're supposed to kind of go learn about the city that you're there to save. So we went to like a local art center and a guy did slam poetry about the Bush administration, and I'm a little liberal, so I'm like, yeah, I get it, but I don't. And then we got to march in the second line, which is awesome. If you're unfamiliar, that's the thing they do in New Orleans where like ladies decide to go do a bar crawl, but then they invite a jazz band and everyone just dances through the streets while 8-year-olds sell beer out of Radio Flyer wagons. It was awesome, but also incredibly surreal because as we're dancing, the houses around us are all empty. And so after we do our little thing, we load into the van and they drive us past all the abandoned cars underneath the freeway overpasses, and we go to the 9th Ward, which is equal parts terrifying and haunting. So I'm, having spent, my previous, year at a funeral, I was hoping for something a little more, exciting. And all I've taken away from this is that New Orleans has been a disaster waiting to happen, and no one did anything about it until it was too late. So I'm pretty eager to jump in and volunteer, but that excitement sort of is drained from me, as well as all the sweat in my body after 10 hours of working in the Louisiana sun and digging a hole in the ground. But of course, the sorority girls, having been in a place for 3 days, need to mark their territory, so they decide, tonight we need to party. So I find myself, in a crappy restaurant in the French district, when the worst thing possible happens to me, which is someone goes on Facebook and finds out it's my birthday. So now it's everybody's job to get me wasted, including the grad student chaperone, who orders me a prairie dog, and I don't know what that is, but I soon find out as a glass arrives and he fills it with equal parts tequila and Tabasco sauce. And slides it across the table at me, and I'm looking at this red concoction thinking, what the hell am I doing on this trip? But now there's a group full of students all staring at me, and I have this compulsion to impress them and show off. So I grab it and I throw it back, and for the first and last time in my life, I swallow it like a champ. And everyone's like, yeah, he did it! And it was like the horns going off at Churchill Downs. We were off to the races, on to Bourbon Street we go, which in the best of circumstances is a shithole. But in New Orleans' current condition is like an abandoned theme park of a shithole. And people are buying me drinks, so it's 2 Jack and Cokes and then 3 of those hand grenades, which are these green drinks with these gigantic flutes, and they fill it full of ice and sugar water and garbage liquor. So I'm starting to feel it as we roll into a bar, and I feel like I should get some fresh air. So I go out onto one of the balconies looking over Bourbon Street, which reminds me of freshman year again, because the night before my grandfather's funeral, I was standing on the balcony in my hotel room. And the room next to me are my parents, and they're arguing. But unlike the arguments they've had before, this time they're arguing about the fact that they're getting divorced. And they're relationship was a disaster waiting to happen, and no one did anything about it until it was too late. But I'm trying not to think about that because I'm here in New Orleans to have a better time than I had last year. So I rally myself and I think, you know what makes me feel better? Being the center of attention. Thank you for coming this evening, by the way. And fuck it, it's my birthday! So I head back on down to the bar, and people keep buying me shots. It's like sex on the drink, sex on the beach. And then someone buys me a hurricane, I shit you not, which seems particularly insensitive considering where we are. And then they buy me this thing where the waitresses come over and they've got vials of Jägermeister in their mouths, and then I have to lean down and they like baby bird it in my throat. Which is supposed to be sexy, but mostly it's really degrading for both of us. At this point, my memory starts to get a little fuzzy. I know I was in the bathroom for a while, chatting up the guy in there. I know I went back out and had an impromptu breakdancing contest against an Asian ROTC student, which involved me doing the worm on a cobblestone floor. And I know we were politely asked to leave because I was screaming at the cover band that, quote, "Don't Stop Believing is the worst fucking song of all time." I don't know how I got back to the van. I know on the ride home I was having a tough time breathing. And I know that 2 of my fellow trip mates had to carry me to my cot in that big tent. I had a tough time opening my eyes the next morning, because I woke up lying on my back with my face covered in vomit. Which I'm instantly aware of the fact that usually when that happens, when people fall asleep on their back and they puke while they're sleeping, they inhale that puke and then they just don't wake up. And all I can think is, what the hell am I doing on this trip? And that's what I think about for the next 3 days doing service work in the Louisiana heat. And by the time I take that 14-hour bus ride back to North Carolina, I've got a pretty good idea about how I ended up here. That the reason I surround myself with people that I don't know very well is because I'm terrified that if my friends learn who I really am, they won't like me anymore. And that the reason I'm constantly trying to impress people is because I can't bear the thought of anyone knowing there's anything ever wrong with me. And most of all, the reason I like being the center of attention is because when I'm the center of attention, I'm in control. And when I'm in control, no one's going to make me think about anything that I don't want to think about right now. So when I get back to school, I go to classes Monday morning. And then that afternoon, I check into therapy. Because I am a disaster waiting to happen, and I'd like to do something about it before it's too late.